Welcome to Reddit Revenge. We have 3 petty revenge stories today. I hope you enjoy. Story 1. Customer said, "I must not know my boss very well. I work for my dad." Pretty great story from work this morning, where I got to one-up this guy. So I'll start by saying I work for my dad at his store. I work the front counter and interact with most people/customers. Also, I look a lot more like my mom. My dad runs a separate business as well, but anybody who needs to talk to him for either business can usually find him in the office here. So, this guy shows up this morning looking pretty ruffled, and asks if my dad was here. I replied, "You just missed him, he is out for the morning doing a couple things." He was very displeased by this information, and was acting very loud/unprofessional. He started looking around the store, and eventually came back to the front counter with a piece of equipment that he wanted to trade, for some work that he apparently did for him before. Keep in mind I know most of my dad's workers, and have never seen this guy before. I told him that I don't do any negotiations while he's not here, and I can't just let him leave the store with something for free. I told him that normally he probably wouldn't want to take that route, but he was welcome to discuss it with him once he's back. He looked at me, and replied, "You're making a big mistake here, and you must not know him very well, because he would do this for me, and blah blah blah." I just looked at him and replied, "I actually do know him quite well, seeing as he is my father." I told him that he could either leave or wait for my dad to get back. He kind of looked up at me and was pretty speechless. I could tell he felt stupid and regretted his comment. He ended up waiting around in his truck for my dad to show up, and guess what? He wasn't gonna do a trade. It's almost like I know my boss well. Apparently, the guy just worked like 2 days for him and then quit. Plus, the thing he wanted was way more expensive than what he was owed. Side note, the pay wasn't made yet because we are bi-weekly. I swear some of the people around here are nuts. But a petty, "don't you know who I am" moment made my day. End of story 1. Now, let's move on to our second story for today. How I got back at a pushy guy on a bad first date. When I was 18 years old, 10 years ago, I was doing the online dating thing. I live in the US, and am about 15 minutes from the Canadian border. My date and I went to Canada together on a first date, because I couldn't drink in the US, but could in Canada, and we wanted to go to a bar/casino. He picked me up in his little sports car, and we rode together through the border crossing into the casino. We played some games, and had some drinks, and were having a decent time. I got to a point where I was decently drunk, and knew if I had any more alcohol I would be out of commission. I told my date I was done drinking, and wanted to start heading home. Instead of listening to me, he went and got us both another round of drinks, and he handed me a big Long Island iced tea. I told him point blank I couldn't drink it because I was at my limit. He didn't take too kindly to that, and got pushy. He told me, "You have to drink it. I bought it for you. If you don't drink it, you're going to make me waste money." No matter how many times I told him no, he continued to push me on this. I got very frustrated and upset because I was alone with this pushy man in another country, and I was very upset with myself for getting into this situation. We argued for a while, and eventually I snapped and formulated a little plan. He agreed to take me home after I finished the drink. I took the drink from him and chugged it. We got into his car and started for the border. It's important to note that this guy was very proud of his car. He spent the whole drive to the border telling me about all the features, and how much he loved it. I spent the whole drive ignoring him and focusing on keeping my sick stomach under control. My goal was to make it through the border crossing at least, which was proving pretty difficult. We did eventually make it through the border crossing, and as soon as we made it back to the US, I turned in my seat to look him in the eyes, and I told him, "I didn't appreciate how you forced alcohol down my throat, after I repeatedly told you no. I know my limits and you ignored and disrespected me." I said I couldn't drink more for a reason. Then, while maintaining direct eye contact with him, I started vomiting in his car. I knew this was coming, and specifically oriented myself to cause as much damage as possible. I threw up on the seat, the floor, the dash, etc. He was freaking out, and I just started crying and telling him this was his fault, and he could either take me home or let me out of the car now, but I will call the police if he doesn't proceed with one of the two options. He dropped me off at home and I never saw him again. End of story 2. Now, on to our final story for today. I forced my bad neighbors into an unwanted move. I got my very first apartment at the ripe age of 26. I was fortunate enough to be able to afford one without roommates. I was a model tenant, paid my rent on time every month, polite to the office workers, never caused trouble. I lived on the top floor of a 3-story building. Well, 2 years after I moved in, I had new neighbors move into the apartment below me. I was working a swing shift, so my hours were 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and I often stayed up late to 3 a.m. to do minor chores, dishes, cooking, cleaning, but not vacuuming. I also had 2 cats at the time. My new neighbors immediately went on the warpath against me. I could not make any noise without them banging on my floor. I unloaded my dishwasher at 11 a.m. on a Sunday, and they flipped out. They complained to the office about my herd of animals. They sent police to my door at 9 p.m. because I was watching TV, at a reasonable volume with the subtitles on. I literally could not make any sound without them complaining. It culminated in one of them pounding on my door for 10 minutes, after I dared call the office to express my frustration. So, I called the office back. Told them that I did not feel safe in my apartment due to my neighbor's actions, legal grounds for me to break my lease. But then I dropped my bombshell. My neighbors had 4 people in a 1-bedroom apartment that had a 2-person max capacity. Apartment management told my neighbors they had to move into a more expensive 2-bedroom apartment, or their lease would be terminated. They moved to the larger apartment on the other side of the complex. My new neighbors were great. 2 adult men who smoked weed on the balcony. Never even spoke to them. Love them. The end. That's all we have today. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. Have a great day.